I'm Carolina, 35, standing in my new apartment when my phone rings. It's my sister Stephanie, hysterical. She's at my old house with a set of keys our parents gave her, claiming they've arranged for her to move in. What she doesn't understand is that house isn't mine anymore. I sold it 2 weeks ago. The papers are signed, money deposited, ownership transferred. My parents thought they were taking control of my life again, but they were too late. If you're watching this video, drop a comment letting me know where you're viewing from. Hit that like button and subscribe if family drama stories resonate with you. Trust me, this journey of reclaiming my independence is one you won't want to miss. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Boston, the firstborn, in what appeared to be a picture-perfect American family. From the outside, we seemed ideal. Successful father, devoted mother, 2 daughters with good grades. But appearances can be deceiving, and beneath our polished family portrait lurked a web of control and favoritism that shaped my entire childhood. My father, Thomas, built his career as a corporate lawyer, climbing the ranks through sheer determination and an uncompromising personality. At home, he applied that same rigidity to parenting. Every decision in our household passed through him first, from the clothes we wore to the friends we were allowed to have. For him, control wasn't just a preference, it was the only way he understood how to show love. My mother, Eleanor, once an aspiring artist, had abandoned her dreams when she married my father. She channeled all her creative energy into crafting the perfect family image and doting on Stephanie. Looking back, I realize now that my mother lived vicariously through my sister, seeing in her a second chance at the carefree life she never had. Then there was Stephanie, 5 years younger than me. From the moment she was born, she became the center of our family universe. While I was expected to earn straight A's, maintain perfect behavior, and take on responsibilities beyond my years, Stephanie was allowed to simply exist and be praised for it. Her mediocre report cards were celebrated as if they were academic achievements. Her tantrums were indulged as artistic temperament. The rules that governed my life simply didn't apply to her. Carolina needs to set an example, my father would say, whenever I questioned the disparity. You're the oldest. You need to be responsible. By age 12, I was cooking family dinners 3 nights a week while Stephanie played video games. By 16, I was managing our family schedule and helping with household finances, while Stephanie was allowed to focus solely on her social life. When she crashed our father's car at 17, they bought her a new one. When I asked for help with college applications, I was told to figure it out myself because independence builds character. The pattern continued through high school. My father mapped out my entire academic future. I would attend his alma mater, study pre-law, join his firm eventually. My attempts to express interest in business or finance were dismissed as phases. Meanwhile, Stephanie flitted between wanting to be an actress, a photographer, a chef, and my parents supported each new passion with expensive equipment and private lessons. College provided my first taste of freedom. I attended Boston University instead of my father's choice, using scholarships I'd secretly applied for. Those 4 years away from home showed me what life could be when I made my own decisions. I discovered my talent for financial analysis and investment strategy. I joined clubs without asking permission. I made friends who valued my opinions. After graduation, I dropped the bomb. I had accepted a position at a financial consulting firm instead of applying to law school. The family dinner where I announced this news remains etched in my memory. My father's face turned from confident expectation to disbelief, then to cold anger. "We didn't invest in your education for you to waste it pushing papers at some bank," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. It's not pushing papers, I tried to explain. It's helping people build financial security, understand investments. It's a disappointment, he interrupted. But I suppose that's what we should expect now. My mother said nothing during this exchange, just looked at me with sad eyes that somehow made me feel worse than my father's anger. Stephanie, however, seized the opportunity to announce she was thinking about law school, instead instantly becoming the family hero. That night marked the beginning of a subtle but persistent emotional freezing out. My calls home went to voicemail. Family gatherings featured pointed questions about when I would get serious about my career. Holiday gifts became practical to the point of insulting books about law school applications appeared under the Christmas tree year after year. Despite this, I threw myself into my new career. I worked longer hours than anyone else in my department, volunteered for challenging projects, and slowly built a reputation as someone who could solve complex financial problems. While my family viewed my career choice as a rebellion, I discovered it was actually my calling. 10 years into my finance career, I had climbed from junior analyst to senior investment advisor at one of Boston's most respected firms. My clients trusted me, my colleagues respected me, and for the first time I felt truly confident in my professional identity. That confidence eventually spilled over into my personal life, leading to a decision that would change everything: buying my own home. I had been saving diligently since my first paycheck, living in a modest apartment, driving the same reliable sedan for years, and carefully investing my bonuses rather than splurging. My financial discipline paid off, and by 32, I had accumulated enough for a substantial down payment on a house in a quiet suburb just outside the city. The day I started house hunting remains one of the most exhilarating of my life. There was something profoundly powerful about walking through spaces, imagining my future in them, and knowing I had the means to make that future real. After touring nearly 20 properties, I found it. A charming two-story colonial with bay windows, hardwood floors, and a small but inviting backyard where I could plant a garden. The house wasn't perfect by conventional standards. The kitchen needed updating, the master bathroom was smaller than ideal, and the basement showed signs of minor water damage. But the moment I walked through the front door, I felt a sense of belonging I'd never experienced before. This house, with all its flaws and potential, could be truly mine. Not a space controlled by my parents, not a temporary rental, but my own sanctuary. You should see the reading nook under the stairs, I told my mother excitedly over the phone after making my offer. And there's this perfect spot for a home office overlooking the backyard. I'm thinking of painting the living room this beautiful sage green. Carolina, my mother interrupted, her voice concerned rather than sharing my enthusiasm. Don't you think buying a house is a bit premature? You're not even married yet? That comment stopped me cold. In my family's worldview, a woman's life followed a strict progression: college, career starter, job, marriage, home buying with husband, children. By purchasing a home on my own, I was disrupting that narrative in a way that apparently made them uncomfortable. Mom, I'm 32 with a stable career and excellent credit. This is a smart financial move, I explained, trying to frame my decision in practical terms they might accept. Your father thinks you should wait, she responded, as if that settled the matter. Real estate is complicated. You could get taken advantage of. Despite their disapproval, I proceeded with the purchase. My father refused to attend the closing, sending a pointed message about his feelings. My mother came but spent the entire time pointing out potential problems with the property. Stephanie rolled her eyes throughout the process, making comments about how suburban and boring my choice was. None of that dampened my joy when the keys were finally placed in my hand. That first night in my empty house, I sat on the floor of the living room with takeout and a bottle of champagne, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. Every square inch of this space represented my choices, my hard work, my vision for my life. Over the next few months, I transformed the house into a home that reflected my personality. I painted the walls in calming blues and greens, installed bookshelves for my growing collection, and splurged on a professional-grade kitchen renovation that made cooking a joy rather than a chore. My backyard became my weekend project. I planted roses, herbs, and a small vegetable garden that yielded its first tomatoes by late summer. What my family couldn't understand was that this house represented more than just a financial investment or a place to live. It was tangible proof that I could build a fulfilling life on my own terms. Every mortgage payment felt like an affirmation: I am capable. I am independent. I am enough. For 3 years I lived peacefully in my home, establishing routines that nurtured me. Sunday mornings reading in the bay window. Wednesday evening video calls with friends while cooking dinner. Monthly book club meetings in my newly finished basement. I'd created not just a living space, but a life that centered my needs and preferences for the first time. My financial situation continued to improve as I took on more clients and received regular promotions. I set up automatic extra payments on my mortgage, invested in retirement accounts, and even started a separate fund for future travel adventures. Finally, I felt like my life was completely my own, stable, satisfying, and secure. Little did I know that my hard-won independence was about to face its greatest challenge, yet coming from the people who should have been celebrating my success. The first sign of trouble came about 3 years after I'd moved in. My doorbell rang unexpectedly one Sunday morning while I was still in my pajamas enjoying coffee and the crossword puzzle. Opening the door, I found my parents and Stephanie standing on my porch with bright smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. "Surprise visit," my mother announced, brushing past me into the house without waiting for an invitation. "We were in the neighborhood and thought we'd stop by." My neighborhood was 30 minutes from their home, in the opposite direction from anywhere they typically went. This wasn't a casual drop-by. It was a deliberate intrusion. These surprise visits became a pattern. Every few weeks they would appear without warning, often at inconvenient times. My father would walk through my house, inspecting my renovations with critical eyes, pointing out what he would have done differently. My mother would rearrange my decorative items when she thought I wasn't looking. Stephanie would sprawl across my furniture, commenting on how much space I had just for one person. Initially, I tried to be accommodating. They were family after all. But their visits increasingly felt less like family bonding and more like surveillance, as if they were checking that I hadn't failed in some way they could use to prove their point about my independence being a mistake. Around this time, Stephanie's life took a downward turn. She had drifted between jobs since college, never staying anywhere longer than 6 months. Her latest position at a marketing firm had ended abruptly, though the stories about why varied depending on who she was telling. To our parents, she claimed company restructuring. To me, in a rare moment of honesty, after several glasses of wine, she admitted she'd been fired for chronic tardiness. What became increasingly clear was that Stephanie was drowning in debt. Designer clothes, a luxury apartment she couldn't afford, and a lifestyle maintained through credit cards had caught up with her. She began calling me for temporary loans that were never repaid. Just until next month, she would promise. "I've got a great opportunity lined up." The great opportunities never materialized, but the requests for money became more frequent. When I finally began refusing, suggesting she speak to a financial advisor about debt consolidation, the family dynamic shifted again. Suddenly, my parents started dropping hints about how my house was too big for just one person, and what a shame it was that all that space was going to waste. Your sister is family, my mother said during one of their unannounced visits. Family helps each other. You have all this room and she needs a place to stay while she gets back on her feet. She has an apartment, I pointed out. Which she can't afford, my father countered. Be reasonable, Carolina. It's not like you're using the guest bedroom. What they were suggesting wasn't temporary help, but a complete takeover of my personal space. The sister, who had never had to share anything, would now be entitled to half of what I'd worked so hard to build. Matters escalated when Stephanie broke up with her boyfriend for the 5th time in 2 years. According to family gossip, she'd been primarily living at his place to save money while continuing to maintain the appearance of having her own apartment. With that arrangement ended, she was truly without stable housing. My parents called a family dinner at their house, which turned out to be an ambush. They had already set up the guest room in my house, in their minds discussing how Stephanie could help with the mortgage, though she couldn't even pay her own bills, and how it would be good for me to have company, though I'd repeatedly explained I valued my solitude. Absolutely not, I finally said firmly after listening to their plans. I love Stephanie, but we don't live well together. She can stay for 2 weeks while she finds a new place, but that's my limit. The table fell silent. Then my father spoke in that cold, disappointed tone I'd heard so many times. I thought we raised you better than this. Family takes care of family. I am taking care of myself, I replied, which is what you always told me to do, remember? The dinner ended with tension thick enough to cut. As I was leaving, Stephanie pulled me aside with tears in her eyes. I wouldn't be any trouble, she said. I really need this, Carolina. For a moment, guilt tugged at me. Then I remembered the dozens of borrowed items, never returned the loans, never repaid the responsibilities she'd shirked while I shouldered them. I held firm to my 2-week offer, which she declined with a hurt expression that would later be weaponized against me in family conversations. A week later, I came home from a business trip to find something off about my house. Nothing was missing, but items were slightly out of place. My desk drawers appeared to have been rifled through. The spare key I kept in a kitchen drawer was not in its usual spot. A sick feeling settled in my stomach when I realized what had happened. Someone had been in my house while I was away, and I had a strong suspicion who it was. My suspicion was confirmed when I found an unfamiliar coffee mug in my dishwasher, the same distinctive brand Stephanie always used. I checked my key hook and counted. All accounted for, which meant Stephanie had somehow obtained another key. Had she made a copy during one of her visits? Had my parents given her their emergency key? The final confirmation came when I accidentally received mail addressed to Stephanie at my address. She had already started using my house as her official address without my knowledge or permission. When I confronted her by phone, she dismissed it as no big deal and said she needed a stable address for job applications. That night, I overheard a conversation that chilled me to the bone. I had stopped by my parents' house to return some borrowed serving dishes and heard voices from my father's study. The door was ajar, and Stephanie's distinctive laugh drifted out. Pausing in the hallway, I listened. She's always been too rigid, my father was saying. Sometimes people need help managing their assets appropriately. The house is way too much for her anyway, Stephanie agreed. She's barely there with all her work trips. It makes more sense for me to be the primary resident. We'll help you get settled, my mother added. Carolina will come around eventually. She always does what's right for the family in the end. I backed away silently, my hands shaking. They weren't just planning for Stephanie to stay temporarily. They were plotting to essentially take over my house, the one thing that was truly mine. The next morning I called a locksmith. By afternoon, every lock in my house had been changed, and I had a new security system installed with cameras covering each entrance. The locksmith gave me fresh keys with "Do Not Duplicate" stamped clearly on them. It was an expense I hadn't planned for, but the peace of mind was worth every penny. The reaction was swift and explosive. My phone began ringing that very evening, first Stephanie, then my mother, finally, my father. I let them all go to voicemail, needing time to process my emotions and prepare my response. The messages they left told me everything I needed to know about their intentions. "What the hell, Carolina?" Stephanie's voice was indignant. "I went by to drop off some mail and my key didn't work. Did you change the locks on me?" My mother's message was laden with guilt, sweetheart. "Stephanie is very upset. I don't understand why you would do something so hostile. We're just trying to help both of you." My father's message was the most revealing. "This childish behavior needs to stop immediately. Call me back so we can discuss reversing this ridiculous decision." When I finally called my father back the next day, his tone was one I recognized from childhood. The voice he used when laying down irrefutable law. "You've made Stephanie feel unwelcome and hurt your mother deeply," he said without preamble. "Family should always have access to each other's homes in case of emergency." "Dad, Stephanie used her key to enter my house when I wasn't there," I explained calmly. "She's been using my address without my permission. That crosses a line." "Don't be so selfish," he snapped. "Your sister is going through a difficult time. You have resources she doesn't. This isn't just about a house. It's about your values and priorities." "My priority is maintaining the boundaries of my home," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I worked hard for this house. It represents my independence." "Independence?" he scoffed. "Is that what you call shutting out your family? What happens if something happens to you while you're alone in that house? Who would know?" "That's why I have an alarm system now," I pointed out. The conversation deteriorated from there, ending with my father's ominous statement. "This isn't over, Carolina. Families find ways to take care of each other even when one member is being unreasonable." A week later, I discovered just how far Stephanie had gone in violating my boundaries. A letter arrived from a loan company I'd never heard of, thanking me for co-signing on Stephanie's new car loan. I had done no such thing. Calling the company in a panic, I learned that Stephanie had listed my address as her primary residence and somehow used my information as a co-signer. It took 3 stressful days, multiple calls, and finally a visit to the loan office with my identification and proof of residence to untangle the mess. The loan officer was sympathetic but direct. "You might want to check your credit report and consider placing a freeze. This looks like identity fraud." The word fraud hung in the air. My own sister had essentially committed a crime against me. When confronted, Stephanie burst into tears, claiming she was desperate and knew they wouldn't approve her without a cosigner. She swore she would make all the payments on time. "That's not the point," I tried to explain. "You can't use my information without permission. It's illegal, Stephanie." "Oh, so now you're threatening to have me arrested," she shot back. "Your own sister, over a misunderstanding." Wow, Carolina. Just wow. This misunderstanding narrative quickly became the official family version of events. According to my parents, I was overreacting to an innocent mistake made by a sister in need. My mother called daily, alternating between tearful pleas and cold disappointment. Extended family members suddenly reached out, urging me to make peace and help poor Stephanie. The family machine was in full operation, working to wear down my resistance. My father called an emergency family meeting at their house, which I reluctantly attended, sensing it would be another ambush, but wanting to face the situation head-on. I wasn't wrong. Both parents and Stephanie sat across from me like a tribunal expression's grave. "We've been talking," my father began, and we think we've found a solution that works for everyone. The solution was breathtaking in its entitlement. They proposed that I legally add Stephanie to my house deed, creating joint ownership. This would allow her to contribute, though she had no money, and give her stability at the expense of mine. In their minds, this wasn't just reasonable, but the obviously correct moral choice. Absolutely not, I said without hesitation. The house is mine. I paid for it. I maintain it. I'm not adding anyone to the deed. This selfishness is beneath you, my father said, leaning forward. Your sister needs security that only family can provide. Then why don't you add her to your house deed? I asked pointedly. An uncomfortable silence followed. Then my mother spoke softly. Because we're getting older, dear. This is about planning for both your futures. The truth hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about helping Stephanie through a rough patch. They were setting up a permanent solution to the Stephanie problem, transferring the responsibility of taking care of her from them to me for the rest of our lives. The answer is no, I repeated. And it will always be no. My father's expression hardened. If you won't be reasonable about this, we may need to explore other options. I have colleagues who specialize in family property law. There are ways to ensure family assets are properly managed when one party is being. He paused, meaningfully difficult. It was a thinly veiled threat. My father, the attorney, was suggesting he might use legal means to force my hand. Whether he actually could was questionable, but the fact that he would even threaten such action showed how far things had deteriorated. As the weeks passed, I began hearing from cousins and aunts that Stephanie was spreading stories about me, claiming I had promised her she could move in, then cruelly changed my mind, suggesting I had plenty of money, but was hoarding it while she struggled, implying there was something psychologically wrong with me because I needed so much space for myself. The constant pressure began affecting my mental health. I had trouble sleeping, worried about what new boundary would be crossed next. I installed additional security cameras and found myself checking them obsessively. At work, my concentration suffered, leading to mistakes I would never normally make. The sanctuary I had created was beginning to feel like a fortress under siege. One evening, returning home later than usual, I noticed subtle signs that someone had been in my house again. Nothing was missing, but things were slightly out of place. A book moved, a cabinet left ajar that I always kept closed. Checking my security camera footage, I saw nothing at the entrances, which meant whoever entered had managed to disable or avoid the cameras. That night I sat alone in my kitchen, a cup of tea growing cold before me, and realized, with startling clarity, I no longer felt safe in my own home. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in years and scheduled an appointment with a real estate attorney. Not one of my father's colleagues or anyone connected to his firm. I needed objective advice from someone with no stake in my family drama. The attorney, a straightforward woman named Diane, listened carefully to my situation without judgment. When I finished explaining, she leaned back in her chair with a thoughtful expression. From what you've described, your father doesn't have any legal grounds to claim interest in your property, she assured me. You purchased it independently with your own funds, and your name alone is on the deed and mortgage. However, she added, her expression growing concerned. I've seen family disputes like this turn ugly in ways that go beyond legal rights. What do you mean? I asked. Family members sometimes file frivolous claims or petitions that, while ultimately unsuccessful, can tie properties up in legal proceedings for months or years. They might claim verbal agreements existed, or that they contributed to the property in ways that entitle them to partial ownership. My father is an attorney, I said quietly. He would know exactly how to do that. Diane nodded grimly, which makes the threat more credible. Has anyone in your family made financial contributions to your home, helped with the down payment, made mortgage payments, funded renovations? I shook my head firmly. Not a penny. I've been careful about that precisely because I wanted the house to be completely mine. That's good, she said. It keeps the situation cleaner, legally. But I'm concerned about your sister using your address for financial matters and potentially accessing your home without permission. That could complicate things. After discussing various options, Diane suggested something I hadn't considered. Have you thought about selling the house? The question caught me off guard. Sell my beloved home, the space I had created for myself, the physical embodiment of my independence. The very thought made my chest tighten. I know it sounds drastic, Diane continued, noting my reaction, but sometimes removing the object of contention is the cleanest solution. Your family can't fight you for control of a house you no longer own. I left Diane's office with a heavy heart, but a growing sense that she might be right. The next day, a chance conversation with a colleague at work added fuel to this unsettling fire. You seem distracted lately, Amanda commented during our lunch break. Everything okay? I rarely discussed personal matters at work, but Amanda and I had become friends over the years. I shared a sanitized version of my family situation, careful not to reveal too many details. Wait, Amanda interrupted, her expression alarmed. Your father is Thomas Wilson, the corporate attorney. When I confirmed this, she hesitated before continuing. Carolina, I think you should know. My husband works at Marshall & Reed. He mentioned that Thomas Wilson was consulting with their family law department about something related to establishing guardian oversight of an adult child's assets. My blood ran cold. Marshall & Reed was a prestigious law firm known for handling complex family estate matters. If my father was consulting with them, he was serious about his threats. It might be completely unrelated, Amanda added quickly, but given what you've just told me, no, that can't be a coincidence, I said, my mind racing. Thank you for telling me. That evening, I made a decision that broke my heart, but felt increasingly necessary for my sanity and security. I would sell my house quickly and quietly before my family could interfere. The next morning, I contacted a realtor who specialized in expedited sales. Lisa was direct and efficient, explaining that selling quickly would likely mean accepting a slightly lower price, but given the desirable location of my home and the strong market, we could still aim for a reasonable figure. How quickly do you need to sell? She asked. As fast as legally possible, I replied. Lisa nodded, understanding the urgency, without pressing for details. We can list it as priced to move, and focus on buyers who can close quickly. Cash offers would be ideal. Fewer contingencies, faster closing. We agreed on a strategy. No public listings, no open houses, no yard signs that would alert my family or neighbors. Lisa would reach out directly to her network of serious buyers looking in my area. The house would be shown by appointment only when I could ensure no family members would drive by. The process moved with surprising speed. Within 3 days, Lisa had arranged 5 private showings to pre-qualified buyers. By the weekend, I had 2 competing offers, both above what I had expected given the rushed circumstances. I accepted the higher one, a cash offer from a young doctor relocating to Boston for a hospital position who was eager to close quickly. As the paperwork process began, I lived in a state of constant anxiety, jumping whenever my phone rang, half expecting my father to call with knowledge of my plans. I told no one except Amanda, swearing her to secrecy. Each night I discreetly packed another box of personal items, storing them in a rental unit across town. The hardest part was walking through my home, knowing I would soon leave it forever. The garden I had nurtured through 3 seasons. The kitchen where I had finally perfected my grandmother's bread recipe. The reading nook where I had spent countless Sunday mornings with coffee and books. Each corner held memories of hard-won independence and peace. Yet as the closing date approached, something unexpected happened. Alongside the grief of leaving, I began to feel a different emotion relief. The house that had once represented my freedom had become a battleground, a source of constant stress and family conflict. Perhaps letting it go was the ultimate act of self-protection. 2 weeks after listing the house, I sat in a title company office signing the final papers that transferred ownership to the young doctor and his wife. They seemed kind and excited about making the space their own. As I handed over the keys, the wife squeezed my hand and said, "We'll take good care of it." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Then I walked out, no longer a homeowner, but somehow feeling more in control than I had in months. That same day, I signed a lease on a modern apartment in a secure building downtown, a place my family would never expect me to choose, with a doorman and a keycard entry system. I arranged for my remaining furniture and boxes to be moved directly from the house to the apartment on the day after closing. For 2 weeks, I told no one in my family about the sale. I changed my mailing address, updated my information at work, and began the process of establishing my new life. The proceeds from the house sale went into a separate account my family had no knowledge of. For the first time in months, I slept through the night without checking security cameras or startling at small noises. The perfect symmetry of timing. The house sale closing exactly 2 weeks before my family's final power play still seems like poetic justice. I had no idea what they were planning, but fate arranged for my countermove to be already complete before they even made their first. The call from Stephanie came on a Tuesday afternoon as I was settling into my new apartment, arranging books on the built-in shelves that had been one of the features that attracted me to the space. "Carolina," her voice was trembling with excitement. "I have amazing news. You won't believe what Mom and Dad did." "What's that?" I asked my guard, immediately up. "I'm standing in front of your house right now," she announced triumphantly. "Mom and Dad gave me keys. They said they've worked everything out so I can move in and help you manage the property." A cold wave of shock washed over me, followed immediately by a strange, almost giddy sense of disbelief. They had actually done it, made a unilateral decision about my property, my life, without even telling me first. The audacity was breathtaking. "Stephanie," I said slowly, "that house isn't mine anymore. I sold it 2 weeks ago." The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. "What are you talking about?" she finally sputtered. "You can't have sold it. Mom and Dad just had keys made yesterday." "Well, they're keys to someone else's house now," I replied, surprised by how calm I felt. "The sale closed 14 days ago. The new owners must not have changed the locks yet." "You're lying," she accused, her voice rising. "You're just saying that to keep me out. Open the door, Carolina. I know you're in there." "I'm not in there," I said. "I'm in my new apartment downtown. If you don't believe me, ring the doorbell. The lovely couple who bought the house might be home. I'm sure they'd be interested to know why a stranger is trying to use keys to their front door." I heard her breathing heavily then, the sound of footsteps. "Oh my God," she whispered after a moment. "There's different furniture visible through the window. Carolina, what have you done?" "I made a decision about my own property," I replied simply. "Just like adults do." The call ended abruptly as Stephanie hung up. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone lit up with my parents' number. I took a deep breath and answered. "What is the meaning of this?" My father's voice thundered through the speaker without greeting. Stephanie says, "You've sold the house. Tell me that's not true." "It's absolutely true," I confirmed. "The papers are signed, the money's in my account, and the new owners have taken possession." Without consulting your family, he demanded, outrage making his voice shake. "How could you make such a significant decision without discussing it with us first?" The irony was so thick, I almost laughed. "The same way you decided to give Stephanie keys to my house without consulting me, I suppose." "That was different," he insisted. "We were trying to help both of you." "By giving away my property?" I asked. "That doesn't sound like help. It sounds like control." "Where are you?" my mother cut, in apparently having taken the phone. "We need to discuss this, as a family, face to face." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to keep my new location private, maintain the clean break I'd created. But another part knew this confrontation needed to happen if I was ever going to establish healthy boundaries with my family. "I'll text you the address," I said finally. "But this is my home, and I expect you to respect that." They arrived 90 minutes later, all three of them storming into the lobby of my apartment building, with expressions ranging from fury, my father, to hurt betrayal, my mother to sullen resentment. Stephanie. The doorman called up for permission. Before allowing them to access the elevators, a security measure I now appreciated more than ever. When they entered my apartment, their eyes darted around, taking in the modern space with its floor-to-ceiling windows and contemporary furnishings, so different from the traditional colonial home I'd left behind. "You did this to spite us," my father began without preamble. "To punish Stephanie for needing help." "I did this to protect myself." I corrected him. "I found out you were consulting with attorneys at Marshall and Reed about taking control of my assets. I'm 35 years old, Dad. I won't let you hijack my life because you think you know better." His momentary flicker of surprise told me the information about Marshall and Reed had hit home. He hadn't expected me to know about those consultations. "You've always been dramatic," my mother interjected. "Your father was just exploring options to help the family." "By potentially having me declared incompetent to manage my own property," I asked pointedly. "That's not help. That's a hostile takeover." "We would never do that," she protested, but her eyes slid away from mine. "The locks had already been changed," Stephanie blurted out, still fixated on her thwarted plans. "When I tried my old key from last month, it didn't work. But Mom and Dad got new keys somehow." I turned to my parents, raising an eyebrow questioningly. My father cleared his throat. "I contacted a locksmith, told them I was your father and needed to access the property due to concerns about your well-being." "You lied to a locksmith to gain unauthorized access to my house," I translated flatly. "Do you realize that's illegal? That it could be considered breaking and entering?" "Don't be ridiculous," he scoffed. "I'm your father." "Yes, you're my father. Not my owner, not my manager, not my legal guardian. We need to be very clear about that distinction." Something inside me that had been building for years, decades really, finally broke free. All the careful management of my emotions, the strategic avoidance of conflict, the accommodation of their unreasonable expectations, it all fell away. "For my entire life you've treated me as an extension of yourselves, rather than an individual," I said, my voice gaining strength with each word. "You mapped out my life without concern for my own desires. You assigned me responsibilities while giving Stephanie freedom. You criticized my choices while bailing her out from consequences." I turned to my sister. "Stephanie, I love you, but you've been allowed, encouraged even, to take and take without giving back. You used my address without permission. You attempted to make me an unwilling co-signer on a loan. You violated my privacy repeatedly by entering my home when I wasn't there. Her face crumpled, but for once I didn't soften my stance to ease her discomfort. And you, I continued, facing my parents. Instead of helping Stephanie become independent, you've enabled her dependence. Then you tried to transfer that burden to me permanently by essentially giving her my house. We were trying to secure both your futures, my father insisted, though his usual confidence seemed slightly shaken. No, I corrected him. You were trying to solve the Stephanie problem without inconveniencing yourselves. You were trying to maintain the illusion that everything was fine while avoiding the hard work of helping her stand on her own. The room fell silent. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Stephanie stared at the floor. My father looked out the window, his jaw working. I sold the house because it was the only way to protect what's mine, I said more gently. I shouldn't have had to take such a drastic step, but you left me no choice. You've shown repeatedly that you don't respect my boundaries, my decisions, or my autonomy. So this is it, my mother asked tearfully. You're cutting us off, abandoning your family. I'm not abandoning anyone, I replied. I'm establishing boundaries. There's a difference. I still want a relationship with all of you, but it has to be one based on mutual respect. They left shortly after my father stiff, with unresolved anger, my mother weeping quietly. Stephanie, sullenly silent. As the door closed behind them, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Grief for the relationship I wished we had relief at, finally speaking my truth, and underneath it all, a growing sense of peace. For the first time in my life, I had drawn a line that couldn't be ignored or erased. Whether they chose to respect it would determine the future of our relationship. 6 months have passed since that confrontation in my apartment. 6 months of rebuilding my life, rediscovering myself, and redefining what family means to me. The journey hasn't been easy, but it has been profoundly transformative. The first month after selling my house was the hardest. Despite knowing I had made the right decision for my safety and sanity, I grieved the loss of my beloved home. I missed my garden, the familiar creaks of the floorboards, the way the afternoon light filtered through the kitchen windows. Some nights I would wake disoriented, momentarily forgetting where I was. My family's reaction didn't make things easier. For 3 weeks after our confrontation, I received no contact from any of them, a silence that was both painful and revealing. Then came text messages from my mother, alternating between guilt trips and awkward attempts at normal conversation. My father communicated through her, apparently unable or unwilling to reach out directly. Stephanie remained completely silent. During this period, I did something I should have done years ago. I started seeing a therapist. Dr. Mercer specialized in family dynamics and boundary issues, and our weekly sessions became an anchor in the turbulent sea of emotions I was navigating. What you're experiencing is common among people who've grown up in controlling family systems, she explained during one particularly difficult session. There's often a grieving process when you establish healthy boundaries, mourning the relationship you wished you had while adjusting to the reality of the one that exists. I also joined a support group for adults dealing with difficult family relationships. Hearing others share similar experiences helped me understand that I wasn't alone, that my feelings were valid, and that establishing boundaries wasn't selfish, but necessary for emotional health. Gradually, I began to create a new sense of home in my apartment. I bought plants for the balcony, creating a miniature version of the garden I had loved. I found new weekend rituals. The farmer's market 2 blocks away, the local coffee shop where the baristas learned my name, the book club that met in the building's community room. Different from my old life, but satisfying in its own way. At work, I refocused on my career, channeling my energy into professional growth. My concentration returned, and with it came recognition. A promotion to Director of Investment Services with a team reporting to me and increased responsibility for client relationships. Perhaps the most significant change came in my social connections. Without the constant drain of family drama, I had emotional energy to invest in friendships. I reconnected with college friends I'd lost touch, with deepened relationships with colleagues, and even started dating again after years of focusing solely on my career and home. Through it all, I maintained minimal contact with my family, brief, polite texts, and occasional phone calls that stayed firmly in neutral territory. I declined Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings, knowing I wasn't strong enough yet to maintain my boundaries in the old familiar settings where patterns were so deeply entrenched. 3 months after our confrontation, something unexpected happened. I received an email from Stephanie with the subject line, "I'm sorry." Opening it with trepidation, I found a lengthy message that showed the first real self-awareness I'd ever seen from my sister. "I've started therapy too," she wrote. "My therapist is helping me see how I've been using you as a crutch instead of developing my own independence. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. I know I need to earn that through actions, not just words. But I wanted you to know I'm working on myself." 2 weeks later, she sent an update. She had found a job as an administrative assistant at a small graphic design firm and was taking night classes in basic accounting. A month after that, she reported moving into a studio apartment she could actually afford. Small steps, but significant ones. My parents' evolution has been slower and more complicated. My mother calls weekly now, and though she still occasionally slips into old patterns, she's making visible efforts to respect my boundaries. My father remains more distant, his pride, apparently still wounded by my assertion of independence, but even he has begun to thaw slightly. Last month, I agreed to meet them for dinner at a neutral restaurant, not their house, not mine. The conversation was sometimes strained, occasionally lapsed into old dynamics, but underneath, I sensed a tentative new foundation forming. They asked questions about my work, and actually listened to the answers. No one mentioned the house I sold or suggested I was making poor life choices, small victories but meaningful ones. As for me, I've discovered something profound through this painful process. True independence isn't just about physical space or financial autonomy. It's about the courage to define yourself outside of others' expectations, to stand firm in your own values, even when those closest to you disagree. I no longer feel guilty for prioritizing my needs. I no longer apologize for setting boundaries. I no longer question my right to make decisions about my own life. This freedom didn't come from a house with my name on the deed, but from finally recognizing my inherent worth as an individual. Do I regret selling my beloved home? Sometimes in quiet moments, I miss specific things about it, but I've come to understand that a house is just a structure. Home is the sense of peace and safety. You create the knowledge that you are exactly where you need to be, living authentically on your own terms. The irony isn't lost on me that by trying to take my house, my family ultimately pushed me toward a deeper, more meaningful independence than I might have found otherwise. In losing something I treasured, I gained something far more valuable: my voice, my courage, and a life truly my own. Sometimes, the greatest act of self-love is letting go of what you thought you needed to hold on to. Sometimes, the path to freedom requires walking away from the very thing you fought so hard to claim. And sometimes, when others try to control your story, the most powerful response is to write a new one entirely. I hope my story resonates with some of you who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your independence? How did you handle it? Drop a comment below. And remember to like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about setting boundaries and finding your own path. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, your life belongs to you, and only you have the right to decide how your story unfolds.